Travel to Alaska can be complicated, and I definitely know that it can be a challenge to know if right now is the right time. Is it too late? Is it too early? Should I be trying? I'm going to get the best pricing? All those are real thoughts. They are completely legitimate, and I totally understand. So I want to tell you in this video exactly when to book your Alaska vacation to get the best availability and pricing. So I'm Steven, host Cap My Adventure Show, and we've been dealing with Alaska travel and the travel industry for the past 6 years. And so I want to come to you from a place of experience so that I can help you understand when to make the most of your trip and when to actually book the stuff. So the way that I would put this is rate things by their actual like online ratings and reviews. So like if they're 5-star rated business, or 4, 3, 2, and 2 or below, or 3 and below even. And then is it a must-do activity? Does it include lodging? Those are the ones you're going to want to book the furthest out. So if they're 5 stars, a must-do activity for you, and that's going to be different for everybody, so I'm not going to make the assumption that I know what you're trying to do. But if it were fishing, or if it's bear viewing, or whale watching, or hiking on a glacier, like whatever that must-do activity is for you, and then does it include lodging? Because some of these places are full service or partial service lodges where they provide the excursions, the food, transportation, and planning. And those are almost always the top rated providers in their respective sectors or industry and location. And they're going to be almost always take reservations between 12 and 18 months to advance. And some of those places might even take it up to 24 months in advance, even if it's just a list. And it just really is kind of the pricing that they're waiting to figure out, but they'd be willing to put you on a list, give you dates, and then let you know what the price is going to be when that time comes. If it doesn't include lodging, then I would take the star rating or the review ratings. And then if it's a must-do activity for you, like absolutely cannot miss it, then I would be planning roughly 12 to 14 months in advance. If it's 4 stars and includes lodging or is lodging, 12 months in advance. If it's 3 stars or less, but it is still a must-do activity, I would say at least 6 months, so January of the year that you're going to travel. And these operators have more availability because the reviews just aren't as good. Not that there are very many bad operators. They kind of end up weeding themselves out. But there are probably some operators with less than 5 or 4.5 star reviews, and so you kind of gotta weigh out, are you okay with the way that they've handled things in the past? Is it a must-do activity for you, and are you willing to take the chance that maybe there is or is not availability, and you could wait a little bit longer? The biggest variable here is that regardless of where they fall on the spectrum, depending on how much actual availability they have in total, is going to determine how quickly they book up. So even if it's or they got 3-star reviews on Google or TripAdvisor or wherever you get your reviews from, but they're in a super remote location and they're the only operator, they're probably going to book 12 months in advance anyways. So you got to keep that in mind on like where are you traveling, and that's a big part of it. So just keep in mind when you're trying to plan, should I be booking this now or later, is how much total availability do they have? If they're a small operator, which is not always easy to figure out, but I wouldn't be afraid to ask that question. How much total availability do you guys have? Like the Hilton Hotel in Anchorage probably has 250 rooms. Like you could probably wait a little longer to book that. But if it's a small or more remote location and they might only have 3 rooms, and regardless of where they fall on the scale, they're probably going to book out. 6 months is definitely the short end of that. 12 months is pretty normal. And then, of course, 12 to 18 months, I'm going to reserve that for only the most sought after providers are going to fall into that category. But it is important to be thinking about that stuff. And as you round the corner into the beginning of each year, right after the holidays, you go into January, everything starts to book up really, really fast, regardless of where they fall on that scale. And I don't want to talk about too much about budget in here, but it almost doesn't matter in this case where you fall on the spectrum. And quite honestly, the more expensive stuff tends to book even faster because it's not just more expensive because it's more expensive. It's more expensive or it costs more money because of the value that those operators are often providing. It's not typically just arbitrary, just cost more money just because. They typically are providing enormous value over some of the other operators that are out there who may not have the same reviews, and they may be charging less. And so that's not to say that that's a good blanket for everybody, but it's a good kind of general idea to give you, what you should expect when you're talking about certain price. And there is a value equation that takes place, but just keep that in mind. So let's go into a little more detail when we're talking about a 5-star review. And I don't mean like a 5-star restaurant. It's not like a rating authority out there. I'm talking about just other customers, real people like you and I, who are using these services or staying at these lodges or staying at these hotels or Airbnbs or whatever it is. That's what I mean when I'm talking about 5 stars. So if it is a business that has 4.9 or 4.8 stars on Google, it's going to be, and they've got a 500 reviews, even if it's 100 reviews, it's going to be a really well established business that does well within their space. And then the next part of that is the must do activity, right? If it's not something that you have to do, this will determine if you feel like you need to book it now or if you're okay putting it off, because if you end up putting it off, there is a good chance that it ends up getting booked and they don't have any availability around your date range. And I've got a whole video talking and explaining the different times of the year and when you should visit. So that's a conversation for another time. But just briefly, if it's July, August, or early September, there's a very good chance that it's going to book up, 12 to 18 months in advance. And then lastly, in this first little piece here, if we're talking about when to book this activity with this equation, the 5 stars must do activity, and it includes lodging, because lodging is one of the harder things to come by. And I'm not going to get into like the logistics of why exactly that is, but it has to do with the asset that comes along with it. But if you are needing a place to stay and they provide the activity and they're, a top rated provider, they're almost always going to book between 12 and 18 months in advance. And some of those providers are booking even further than that, or at least they have a list of people they're going to call or give preference to. And in some cases, if we're talking about fishing lodges or bear viewing lodges, where it's a very specific activity, they do end up with repeat clients. And so you're trying to work your new reservation into their existing clientele. And so the sooner you know that you would like to go and you're ready to start working with them on picking dates is going to be better. Do expect to pay some kind of deposit. Obviously, those operators take some level of risk when they're taking reservations that far in advance. They have to come up with a price for you that may or may not be subject to change because of things that are out of their control, like the price of fuel, insurance, things like of that nature. So expect some kind of policy there regarding price changes, or at least a non-refundable deposit in that case, or refundable up to a certain percentage up until about your travel. Understand that is a long ways out to be handing over deposits, but there is a lot of risk on the operator side as well in terms of giving you a price for stuff that, as we found out over the last few years, could change dramatically over 12 to 18 months. So then the next one is, if it doesn't include lodging, but it is a top rated provider and it's a must do activity, I would recommend 12 to 14 months in advance. Not everybody's going to take reservations that far out when it's just an activity and there's no lodging involved. I do know that there are some fishing guides and other very specific tours that do offer wait lists, or at least a pencil in on their calendar for a specific date for a certain number of people. And then as they come into their season where they start taking reservations, typically sometime after the end of that summer for the next summer, that's when they'd be thinking about it. So for example, if it was the summer of 2024, it's December now of 24 that I'm filming this, but if it was the summer of 2024, most of the operators that fall into this category will start actively taking reservations at the end of that summer. Like they'll be taking deposits, firming up their calendar, but they may have a list running before that. And so if you know that you want to do this certain thing and you know you want to do it with that provider, I wouldn't wait for like the 12-month window to close or a 6-month window in January to call and book them, because there's a very good chance that they are booked or that they have limited availability on the activity that you want to do. And then I would move down into just lodging in general. If they're 5 stars or less, or they've got less than, a 5 on their reviews, then, but it does involve lodging, I would recommend 12 months in advance. If they'll take it, again, some of those places might fall into that previous category where they're not willing to take a reservation until the actual end of their operating season. Because some of these places up here in Alaska are small teams. They might only be 4 or 5 people running the operation year round, and they might only be 1 or 2 people running the operation year round, and they just hire help for the summer to actually perform the service. But as far as the office staff goes, it might only be 1 or 2 people. So they may not be willing to take reservations that far in advance if they're not set up for it, depending on how organized they are. And then if you're looking at a 3 or less star location or activity, but it is still a must do for you, I would recommend 6 months at the latest. So if you were going to travel in 2025 and it was January and you're just coming out of the holidays, that's basically when everyone in Alaska would be expecting stuff to start to spin up. And those are going to be your, I would call them late bookers, but in some cases, you may think that you're early by booking in January. And I would say that for most of the things, that is probably either right on time or late, depending on how popular that operator is. And the one last thing that I really want to touch on is when you're keeping in mind total availability, especially when it comes to lodging, the more remote the location is, the further out that booking date is likely going to be. So for example, if you're going to be traveling to Anchorage and that's all you were going to be doing is you're going to be doing activities in and around Anchorage, lodging, you probably could wait till January. I don't think that's going to get you the best pricing. I would still be looking about 12 months in advance for the best pricing. As you come into January, I would expect to pay kind of like their surge, like they know they're tracking, they can see that that is about to occur and that they know they're going to see an influx in bookings. And so they're going to raise their price because they know at that point these people need a place to stay. So I would avoid booking 6 months out across the board. It also means that if there's going to be price adjustments, those businesses have likely already made them. If you're booking 6 months out, where you may find some savings if you're willing to book a little further, or let's say they're 80% booked and now they're going to try and make 20 or 30% more on the remaining reservations, they may raise the price. And these are just things that we've seen happen. And this happens throughout the travel industry. Alaska's not special here, but it is something to keep in mind if you're going to wait to the last minute to make this booking or make your travel reservations. This is when I would expect to see those prices go up. The exception to that being is airfare. Now, because airfare does typically book further out normally, they can sell legally, can sell it, I think it's just shy of 11 calendar months that they can sell flights. So that's typically, after the 6 month mark is when we start to see flight prices increase the closer you get to the actual travel date. So if you're thinking about flying from the lower 48 to Alaska, and I can't say this is true for Europe or the rest of the world because I don't have a lot of experience traveling from there to Alaska, I would recommend if you're going to travel that summer, June, July, August, September, to be booking that in January. And if you're going to be June, maybe you want to think about it in December. So that's kind of how I would structure booking my flight. And then I would be booking my lodging and excursions between 12 and 18 months and 6 months at the absolute latest. And I think that that would basically set you up for success in terms of planning your trip and when you should be booking that stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comments below. Let me know. We love the feedback. If you found the video useful, we certainly appreciate it if you give us a like so we can get this out to more people who need to see stuff like this. And I appreciate you guys being here, and I'll see you on the next one.